That's always a good thing. So, okay, so you guys have survived week 1. You haven't quit on me yet. So now we are moving on to week 2, which shouldn't be too bad. So week 2 should be fairly easy when it comes to the material and what you have to do this week. So we are going to be looking at graphing and then focusing on linear equations. So it's kind of a mishmash of sections, but there is a plan behind all of this. So we're taking the very last section of chapter P, which is the rectangular coordinate system and graphs. And then chapter 1 has one section of graphs, graphs of equations. So those go together. And then chapter 1 goes to 1.2 and 1.3, which are linear equations, and those are in one variable where you're solving for x. And then chapter 2 has a section on linear equations in two variables where you're graphing linear equations. So we're kind of combining these so that we have the graphs, we have the linear equations, and then you're putting them together to graph linear equations. So it's completely fine that we are skipping parts of chapter 1 to get to 2.1 because the parts we're skipping in chapter 1 you don't need for 2.1. So you're not missing anything from skipping the rest of chapter 1, and we're actually going to go back next week and finish chapter 1. But since 2.1 and chapter 2 sort of fell in with what we're talking about, it just made sense to put it all together. Now, most of these topics were covered in Fundamentals of Algebra if you took that class, and you're going to be looking into it in much more, in a deeper depth, especially with the linear equations in two variables. So this is still sort of review. I think this is probably more familiar for a lot of people because we're going to be talking about mx plus y equals mx plus b, and a lot of people, if they don't remember much about algebra, that's what they remember. So this week shouldn't be too bad. So making connections, the material that we're doing this week can be used for business applications, sales, profit, revenue, depreciation, figuring out salaries, anything where you have some sort of rate and it's constant, that can be used with linear equations. And a lot of business applications tend to have that sort of situation. Statistics actually relies on what we're doing this week. So if you go on to statistics, that's actually why MA105 is required before you take like business statistics, because you actually need linear equations and this understanding in order to be able to do some of the things in statistics. Because we're going to be graphing, presenting data on graphs, you're going to sort of learn how to do that and at least how to read graphs. So that's relevant. Construction, actually, you have to solve a lot of equations with construction, and some of the models that we talk about are like perimeter or area, and those sort of things that you do in construction. We are going to also be briefly looking at the Pythagorean theorem. That's also used in construction. Distance and time problems, there's a formula D equals RT, so that is used a lot in real life. You know, anything where you're trying to determine how long it's going to take you to get somewhere, knowing your speed, or you know the distance and the time, and you could figure out how fast you need to go. That's what we're doing this week. Solving basic arithmetic problems, you can always take a basic problem where you're adding, subtracting, and then start working with unknowns. So that's covered this week. Unit conversions actually can be done with equations, and they can be done with proportions. So that's something that is connected to this week. And as I mentioned when I was talking about the business applications, if you have anything that has a constant amount of change, what that means is that it's changing, but it's changing by the same amount every time. That is a linear equation, and so you can model that. And so a lot of things in life are like that. Temperature conversions actually are linear, so there's a lot of relationship. And you'll see a lot of this when you're reading through the material, especially 1.3, because that's models of linear equations. And then when we get into the discussion, for sure, you'll be seeing how this is used in real life. So what I like to do is talk about what sections are prerequisites for you to be successful this week. And I do this so that you can see where the prior weeks are being used, where that information is coming into play, so that you can see that you're actually using the same concepts over and over again. And then this is also helpful because if you're in, let's say you're in section 2.1 and you're stuck, you at least know which sections you might want to review if you're missing something. So it gives you an idea of where you might find some of the missing steps if maybe you skipped a step, or if the book doesn't show a step and you need to see it in more detail. So looking at the things that are prerequisites, the most important skills that you're going to be reinforcing this week are working with exponents, evaluating expressions, factoring. I mentioned last week, factoring comes up all the time. You are going to be factoring. Rational expressions. So you're going to be doing some simplifying, multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting. So those are the things that are sort of popping up this week. And so you'll get some reinforcement. So if you're a little weak on rational expressions, you'll get more practice. And then that also, so you know that, oh, okay, I'm weak on that. I might want to do some additional practice or look into additional practice problems on that. So this gives you an idea to see where we've come from and how it's moving us forward. And if I'm going to zoom in on section 1.3 and 2.1. So if you're looking at 2.1, it actually does not depend on section 1.3 at all. So when I get to the end of this presentation and I give you the suggested schedule, I actually suggest you do 2.1 before 1.3. And there's not a problem with skipping that because they don't rely on each other in any way. So you're not missing anything if you do those out of order. So that's the topics. So now let's take a look at what you need to do. You've got a discussion this week, the ungraded practice assignment, an assignment, and then this is where you're going to have your first quiz. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the quiz, how that works, because it's different than you may have experienced before. If this is your first time at Grantham, then you have no expectations of what a quiz at Grantham is like, so that this will be good for you because this will be going forward. The quizzes, the way we do quizzes in this class is standard for the engineering courses because most people in the math classes are going towards engineering. So if you're in other things like business or medical billing and coding, this might be different for you, these types of quizzes, but I'll get into that when we get into more detail. So let's start with the discussion. And I have already gotten questions on how to do the discussion, and the week has barely begun. So everybody who asked me, I said, hold off, watch my session, because hopefully your questions will be answered. So in our discussions, because it's boring to just kind of solve math problems, and a lot of people are like, what can I discuss about math? What we do is we try to do connections to real life, where you are doing some math, but it's in a way that you can actually have something that you can discuss. And so this is what we're looking at for this week. When you run a business, so this is a business application week, or even if you're investing in stocks, you want to make sure that you want to invest in a stock that's going to make you money. Or if you're running a business, you want to make sure that your business is making money. And so you want a way to predict whether things are looking up and you're making profits, or whether you're going to be losing money. And you want to do this maybe based off past experience, past data. And so when you do this using statistics, and this is why those who are in business take business statistics, you do something that's called a regression. So there's a process to basically create an equation that you can use to predict future performance. And so that's something that's really helpful if you're in a business, because you need to be able to predict, because say you're owning a business and you have shareholders, you want to prove to them that you're going to be making money. Now, if you're making a prediction and your data is something that it follows a line, then what we do is we use a linear regression. So there are different types of regression. There's polynomial regression, there's exponential regression, and so there's different types that you can do. And through this course, you're going to learn those different types, or at least what they look like. We won't be doing regression since that's just statistics. What we will be doing is a simplified version. And so for the discussion, we're going to be doing a simple version of predicting based off of a business, some real data, we're going to be getting an equation for a line based off of 2 points of data. So it's very simple because we're only taking 2 points of data. We're not taking all of the data into account. So it's a really basic precursor, but it gets you to the idea of what you would need to do if you go into statistics. So we're kind of leading you there using what we know so far as algebra. So I have here a screenshot of, this is actually Microsoft revenue. So you can see that. And so if you're going to do a linear equation, and linear is you're going to have a line, you need to say, okay, does my data look like it roughly follows a line? Because if it does, then it's probably a good idea to predict it using the equation of a line. So this particular thing, it depends. So if I ignore maybe say the last year of data, maybe I can see all the years before that were a pretty good line. You know, maybe that 1 year is just unusual. But if you want to try to follow the data, maybe you do this and you're like, it's not really a line, but if I kind of skip that inside part, yeah, that can be a line. So this is some of the stuff that you're going to be discussing. You're going to get an equation, but how do you determine what points you use to get a good line? Do you think you use the right points to make the line? You know, there are different lines you can draw based off of how you look at the data. So this is the motivation. We're going to be taking what you're learning, linear equations, and applying it to real life to do some predictions. So looking at the exact prompt itself, you have basically 2 parts. Part 1 is doing research, and then part 2 is actually doing the math. So for part 1, you need to choose a public company that you are interested in, that you might want to know how are they doing. And you want to choose a public company because public companies have their data available for you. If you have a private company, it's very difficult to find the information. So you choose a company, and then you want to find 2 years of data listing the total sales or total profit or total revenue, some sort of money data. So there are 2 websites that you can use that I recommend. The first one is statista.com. The second one is macrotrends.net. So I actually used macrotrends.net to get that Microsoft picture. And so you can use either one of those, and you need to pick 2 years and then create 2 ordered pairs. And ordered pairs are year, comma, sales. Year is always going to be your first value. So I have macro trends already up. So this is, oops, let me get that back up. There we go. So macro trends is up here. And so you want to search for a company that you might be interested in. Or you can pick like a, maybe if you know you're going to look at an oil and gas company. What I did is I just clicked on stock research. And then I said, oh, here are a whole bunch of companies. And so let me pick one. So I had done Microsoft, so I'm going to click on Microsoft again. And so you have all of this data here. So if you go to revenue and profit, because that's what we care about. So I'm going to just click there. And then they give you some information and they give you the picture. So you want to try to pick a company that looks like it could be a line, and actually it's not a perfect line. It goes up and down, but it's roughly kind of a line. So I think getting an equation for a line wouldn't be a bad predictor for Microsoft. It doesn't have any huge curves or anything like that. It's roughly linear. So you want to pick something that kind of looks like a line, and you want to get the information. So there's a tab here that says revenue, and they actually tell you the revenue here. So it tells you for 2019, they had 100, let me even zoom in here. Oops. There we go. So 2019, it was $125.843 billion of revenue. And then you have data for 2018, it was 110.36. So you have data here. You don't have to pick these years. You could go to financials up here. And then they actually give you more details. So it goes to 2014 here. And I think actually if I zoom out, we might even get further back. Yeah, so you can even scroll. So if you don't like using, you can pick other years depending on the picture, which looks like a better point for you based off of that graph. And then you can pick, you want the revenue number, or you can do profit. It's up to you which one of those, as long as you're being consistent. And so you just want the year, and then you want to know the number. So you have all of this available here, and you can do this for any company that you choose. So all you have to do is go to macro trends, and you can just type in the company right here. So that is available for you. So that's the research part, is just getting data off of here. So once you have that data, I'm going to go back to the discussion here. That's when you start doing the math. And so it's multiple steps here. The first part is you have to find the slope. So you have 2 points, 2 sets of data, and you find the slope. So the slope is an equation that you were going to learn about in section 2.1. So you need to have gone through 2.1 before you can do the math. Then you're going to use point slope form to get the equation of the line. So you're going to find the slope, which is telling you how much it changes, and then you're going to get an equation based off of that data. And in 2.1, there's actually an example with sales for a company. So that example doesn't show every step, but it should give you a good base. And then once you have your equation, you're going to use the equation to predict the sales for 2021. So 2 years from now, which is 2021, you're going to predict how much do I think this company is going to make then. And so that's the math part in the discussion. And then what this opens up is a discussion when you're replying to each other, or even at the end is, do you think that this is a good prediction? Do you think that your company is going to follow this trend? Do you think there are maybe different order pairs that might have been better to choose from? So there's a lot of things that you can do to analyze what you have here and to discuss whether you think that this is going to work for prediction, or if you think maybe there's something better that you can choose. Are there any questions so far? So in addition to explaining that, what I've done is sort of laid out how your discussion should look so that you know, like, what do you need to put in your discussion to kind of lay it out here. So you should start out with some introduction to what's going on. Don't just start with the numbers. You need to give us some context to where these numbers are coming from. So tell us what company you chose. Why did you choose that company? Tell us what your years were and what the numbers were for those years, and share the link where you got that data. So that way we can go back to that link, take a look at the graph, or say, oh, you know, maybe this is a different shape. Maybe you should choose different numbers. So once you've done that, then you want to show your math where you're showing the work for each step. You're explaining what you are finding, what your answer means or represents. So don't just do the math. Tell us, okay, now I'm going to find the slope. Okay, my slope was this. Now I'm going to use point slope form. I'm solving for y. This is my equation. Now I'm going to predict. Like, you kind of walk us through it. And then lastly, at the end, you can just do a little reflection. Do you think your equation is accurate? You know, what is this telling you in real life? Like, is this an equation that maybe you will actually start using? You know, are you going to use this? And, you know, you can even create an Excel spreadsheet to do these kind of things, and then you can use this to go into stocks and all this crazy stuff. But that's the discussion in a nutshell. So hopefully I've given you enough details that you can at least get started, and I've told you what you need to do. You need to find slope. You need to use point slope form. So that gives you something that when you're looking in the textbook, you can look for those things to help you out. Are there any questions? Okay. So since I don't see any questions, I'll be moving on to the assignments here. So you've got your ungraded practice assignment, and this does come from 3 different areas because we are sort of pulling from 3 different chapters. But this is great practice to help you understand the concepts, make sure you have an idea of what's going on. And you can always check your answers in the ebook. They have the answers right there. There are videos on CalcView. There are worked out step-by-step solutions on CalcChat. Those are both part of the textbook's website. Oh, not yellow. That yellow's no good. I'll just put these over here. So hopefully you bookmarked the textbook website because it is so useful. And then if you do find yourself in a time crunch and you don't have a time to do as much practice as you might want, I at least do the checkpoint exercises that are in the reading, in the sections that you have to read, if nothing else, because that at least will give you some practice. And there are answers to the checkpoint exercises in the textbook, and there are videos for the text or the checkpoint exercises on the textbook website, so you can still get the benefit to see, okay, I didn't quite get this. Let me see how to work this out. Okay, so your graded week 2 assignment, it's going to be just like your week 1 assignment in that you basically have 10 problems that you're doing. You want to show all of them so you can get feedback, but they are graded only right or wrong. But you can resubmit for a better grade, and I encourage you to do so because that helps you learn from your mistakes, and working on a resubmission will help you study for the quiz as well because then you're learning the material and you're working on it some more. Some tips that I do have is that it's helpful for a lot of people to read through the assignment before they start going through the material. That way they know what to look for. And then if you do want help, make sure you ask me before 3 p.m. on a Tuesday because generally before 5 o'clock, I am looking at my email again Tuesdays, unless I have a live session or something like that. And so if you want to have time to get feedback, or then if you email me before 3 p.m., then at least there is time for me to respond and give you feedback. So the earlier you can start it, the better. If you start it later and I'm not available, then tutor.com is your best place to go to for questions. Because if I'm not, if it's later on a Tuesday and I'm just not going to be at my computer, you're going to need to be able to get your questions answered. So tutor.com is available 24/7, and so that's what they're there for. And just as a reminder on the assignments that yes, I do accept pictures of your work. Yes, I do accept scanned work. No, you do not have to type it up in Word. But if you are going to have it handwritten, at least make sure that it's easy to read, everything's in order, it's one file. Make it as easy as possible for us to leave feedback. So are there any questions on the assignments? I know that not all of you, some of them have been graded, not all of them have been graded, so I don't know what kind of feedback you've gotten yet. They will be graded, the week 1 stuff will be graded by Friday night. So there's still a couple days of grading, but are there any questions on that so far?
I just wanted to say thank you for the template.
You're welcome. When I first started teaching this class, I didn't have a template and the stuff was all over the place. And I thought, you know what, if I provide a template, that at least helps you stay neat all the questions are already in there. You don't have to mess with trying to type it out. A lot of people like to print it out and then work it out in the spaces. So I'm glad that you're appreciating that, that it's helpful.
I can't tell you how many times in the MA104 class, I was typing it up but going back and forth between the assignment post and my Word document to make sure I typed up the problem right.
Yeah, it's on my to-do list to make templates for the 104. But that has been, I'm like, 105 has a lot more students, so that's been my priority.
That was the one that I thought, if I make a mistake, it's going to be because I copied the problem in wrong. So I'm liking the template. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's talk about the quiz, because I'm already getting questions about this, and this is very important to see how this is working out, because it is unusual. So how do quizzes work? So your quizzes are 10 multiple choice questions. And now here's the thing with multiple choice and with math. You all know that it's very easy to make a small mistake on math. If you do that and you're doing multiple choice, then you don't get any points because there's no way to show your work. But you also know how horrible it is to try to type up math. So while your quizzes are multiple choice, you will have to show your work and submit it in a Dropbox. So you've got 10 multiple choice questions and you have 1 hour. The reason why the quizzes are timed is because in the past we have had a lot of issues with students cheating. And so in order to combat that, we have to time them so that you have to basically know the material and you can't just have other people do the work for you and like look online for the answer and all that kind of stuff. So they are timed at 1 hour. What that means is that as soon as you open the quiz, the time will start. So you have to, you don't want to open the quiz until you're ready to take it, because once you open it, the time starts and you have to do your work. So, whoops. The clock starts ticking as soon as the quiz is open. Now, because it's timed, there's another reason why we have it multiple choice, because we don't want you to waste your whole hour trying to type up the math. So when you're taking the quiz, do all of your math on paper. So write down all of your work on paper as you go through the quiz. Don't worry about trying to type it up nicely or anything like that. Just take the quiz. And a lot of people say that really you don't have to worry so much about the time on the quiz. There's plenty of time. I rarely get complaints that there's not enough time. Like, it's very rare. There's plenty of time. Just take the quiz, answer the questions, and you'll be okay. If you're going into engineering, timed quizzes are going to be standard for you. So you're going to have to just get used to this, because pretty much every single class in the engineering school, any electrical engineering classes, computer science classes, the higher level math classes, they're all timed. So this is just standard for everything going forward, if that's your area. So you have to get used to it being timed. But I don't want you to worry about the time. Do your work on paper. The thing about successfully completing timed quizzes is that if you don't know how to do a problem, skip it and come back to it later. Don't spend all of your time on one problem and not have enough time to do the rest. Do the easy problems first and then go back. And it's completely fine if your work is all over the place. Just make sure you're labeling each problem with the question numbers, so that way it can be organized later. But your best bet, do the ones you know how to do, go back, do the harder ones later, and you should be fine as far as doing the quiz, and guessing is better than not having an answer at all. So what you do is, after you've done the quiz, now you have all of your work on paper. and you need to submit your work because this is the only way you're going to get partial credit. Because if you made a mistake with like a negative sign on the multiple choice and then you had a guess because your answer wasn't there, then you get 0 points out of 10 because each question is 10 points. So you're going to want to submit your work for partial credit. That's how you can get points back for, small mistakes. So in order to do that, there is a separate drop box. It will say like week 2 quiz drop box, week 3 quiz drop box. It is required for you to turn in your work there. If you do not submit your work, that means you get no partial credits, and depending on the grader, they may decide that, you know what, you don't have any work, there's no proof you know this, I'm going to actually take points away. If you have to take calculus, the standard in calculus is that if you don't submit your work, you get a 0. Even if you had gotten 100% on the multiple choice without work, you get a 0. So submit your work. We're kinder here in college algebra because we're not a 300 level class like calculus, but I also want to make sure that you are prepared for if you have to go on to calculus so that you know what to expect. So you need to turn in your work. So once you have completed your quiz, you can take a photo of your work, you can scan it. You are welcome to rewrite your work so that it's neater and in order, because I don't want you to worry about neatness while you're taking the quiz. I just want to make sure you take the quiz. So you don't have to submit it immediately. You can take the time to make your work look neater if you need to. Scan it, take a picture, and then you upload that to the quiz Dropbox. So what happens is once it's in the Dropbox, that's where you get your partial credit. So the grader will open up your quiz and then open up the Dropbox so that they're looking at them at the same time. If you have no work on a problem, you may get only half credit. It depends on whether the problem requires work or not. If it's a problem that really doesn't require any work, then if you got 10 points on it, you're not going to lose any points. But if it's a problem that's you got right, but it requires a lot of steps and you have absolutely no steps, you may only earn half credit on that because you're not backing up your answer and it's possible you just got lucky. If your work does not match your answer, you also may only earn half credit. So if it's sort of the same situation that like maybe you made a guess and then you started working through the problem and it doesn't quite match. It depends on, now if it didn't match because you have a sign error or whatever, then that's a different story. But it's possible that you could only get half credit depending on the situation. If you have work that's partially credit and you are partially correct and say you got a 0 on the question because your answer wasn't there, you had to just pick something, or maybe your answer was there but you got there incorrectly, or it's the wrong answer, you can still get partial credit. And then you'll get points added to your score. So I have a table here kind of detailing how this might work out. So you can get 10 points if your problem was marked wrong incorrectly, because sometimes we're pulling from a test bank, so the questions are random, and sometimes they accidentally pull 2 of the same answers. And so if that happens, sometimes you have the right answer, but you picked the wrong one. So you could have that overwritten. You get 10 points. If most of your work is correct and you just made a small error, that's 7.5 points instead of the 0 that you would have as a regular multiple choice. You can get 5 points if you have the correct answer in your work but not on the quiz, or if it's right on the quiz but you don't have any work, or maybe your work is just completely wrong, so you'll get half credit for that. 2.5 points if you at least have a little bit correct. So if you try and you really don't know what you're doing, you can still get some points, at least for trying. And then you would get a 0 basically if it's clear that you cheated in some way, or you have no work and no right answer, there's just absolutely nothing there. So this is how like your points are going to be adjusted based off of your work. And then after the grader goes through, makes these adjustments, you're going to get a score in the Dropbox that tells you how many points you earned back. So from teaching this class for multiple terms, people often earn 5 to 10 points back. In some cases, some people have earned up to 20 points back on their quiz. And For a 100-point quiz, 5 points is 5%. 10 points is 10%. 10% is a whole letter grade. So you can earn quite a bit back on your quiz by turning in your work. So it's really, really, really important that you write your work, don't throw it out. I've had some people throw out their work after they take the quiz. Don't do that. Keep your work, submit it to the Dropbox, and it is in very rare occurrences I've seen anybody lose points. It's very, very rare for people to lose points. Most people gain points and get extra partial credit basically added onto your quiz. So that is how this whole quiz system works. Do you guys have questions? I'm sure there's probably things that you have questions about that I haven't thought about.
I have a quick question. I know you said you don't have to submit the work right away, that you've got time to write it up. What is that time period so that the grader sees it at the same time they pull your quiz to grade it? Is it by the next day? Is it like within an hour?
Usually, so most of our graders, we have one grader that grades pretty quickly, but if you turn in the work after she's graded, that won't be a problem. She'll just go back and open it back up again. Most of our graders tend to grade on Fridays. We have one that does grade on Wednesdays, but most of them grade on Fridays. So if you get it in by Friday, you'll be okay. And if you get it in after that, I've had some people turn in their work by the end of the term because they lost it or they had to rewrite it, and they didn't lose any points for that. They still got the partial credit. Sooner is better, but as long as it's in by the end of the term, you'll be okay.
Okay.
Are there other questions? I'm sure you guys will have questions next week after you've gone through this, and you're like, hold on, how did that work? So if you do have questions later, of course, you can ask them. So as far as the week 2 quiz itself, now that we've talked about how quizzes work, let's talk specifically about the week 2 quiz. So this quiz is on week 1 material, and there is a reason why we do that. It's because we want you to have a chance to get feedback on your assignment and learn from your mistakes before you take a quiz on it. Because otherwise, if you take a quiz the same week you're learning the material, you don't really know you did anything wrong until you got your feedback. By then, it's too late. So our quizzes are always on the previous week. And so that way, you can use your assignment that you got graded to actually help you study for the quiz. So your quiz for this week is going to be on week 1 material. So it's going to be on the order of operations. It's going to be on evaluating expressions. You'll be simplifying exponential expressions, rational expressions, and radicals. You'll have to multiply polynomials. You'll have to factor. You will be doing adding and subtracting of rational expressions and polynomials, and you'll be multiplying and dividing rational expressions. There is basically one question for each of these. So if I highlight, so there's one question there, one question, one, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's one question on each of these topics. And this actually matches with the assignment, because the week 1 assignment, you basically had one question on each of these topics. And so you can see a direct match on the assignment to the types of things they'll be quizzed on, which is why I suggest using your assignment as a study guide to at least help you understand and know what you need to do. In addition to using your assignment to study, there are also additional resources. So I have linked here, the textbook's website has pre-tests and post-tests. So if you do the one for chapter P, that should cover you for everything that you did in week 1. And then I took a look at where most people struggle, and people just really struggle on those rational expressions. I'm sure that you guys all feel the same way, that dealing with those fractions and those x's in the denominator and everything is a struggle. So I have 3 links here to this website that's called ixl.com. This website is amazing. I don't pay for it, but I would in a heartbeat because it is so good. So I'm going to bring this up. Oops. So this is what ixl.com looks like, and this is what the link takes you to. And I'm going to zoom in just to make sure it's more readable. So I had a link to simplifying rational expressions here. And so here's a rational expression. Looks like something that we had to do during that section. And then you would put in your answer. There's a button here to do fractions. You can do exponents in parentheses. And then you would hit submit. There's also this option, learn with an example. So that actually walks you through so you can see how to do something like this. And then you can go back to practice. And then you have your problem. What I think is really cool about IXL is that this is a good way to practice because it actually tells you how long it took you to answer that question because it has time elapsed. So that's a good way to make sure that, you know, you're going to be okay with a timed test because you can see how long it took you to take a question, do a question here. The other thing that's really nice is that it has these suggestions at the bottom. So if you're not ready, okay, then maybe you just want to simplify this. Here we have some factoring. Maybe in order to simplify these, you're not good at factoring. You need to practice factoring. So if you're not ready, it has some suggestions of skills you need before you do something like this. And so you can click on those and then practice that. So I've got 3 links in the PowerPoint that I've suggested here. And this is all free. You don't have to pay for this. There is a membership. I've never even looked at it because I just do everything free and it's never asked me to pay or anything like that. I just click on learning. And then I pick on topics instead of grades because grades are really irrelevant. But then you've got algebra. Okay, let's see all of the algebra skills. And then, fractions if you're not good at fractions. Functions and equations, So you can browse a whole bunch of things, even word problems here. So all of this is free. And so on the PowerPoint, I have 3 websites linked to some of the things that people struggle with so you can get some practice. So I would definitely print off this page or save this page on the PowerPoint or whatever you need to do. This should help you study for the quiz. Are there any questions? Okay, so with that, all of that, so now let's just take a look at the suggested schedule that I have for you guys for the week. Of course, you can modify this as any way that you need to. So I'm going to just zoom in here. So in the reading, I just have going in order, but I did flip-flop 2.1 and 1.3, and that's just so you have time to work on the discussion before the discussion is due. Since the discussion post is due Sunday, I want to make sure that you get to 2.1 before then. P.6 is easy enough that you could probably do that in 1.1 at the same time if you really wanted to. And then I've got various review exercises, and now parts of the assignment. So the first 3 problems on the assignment you can do after you go through 1.1. Problem 1, specifically answer that by graphing. A lot of people try to solve that one. You haven't technically learned how to do that for that type of problems. But 1.1 teaches you how to do it by graphing. So use graphing to answer that question. And Desmos.com is a website that you can use for that graphing. So then you can also do 2 and 3. Then question 4 goes with 1.2. Then questions 5 and 6 are with 2.1. And then question 7 is with 1.3. And so you can do a little bit of the assignment in the time, and that should give you plenty of time then at the end to make sure that you have time to take the quiz, ask any questions, turn in the assignment, all that sort of stuff. So that is all I have for you guys. I really appreciate you sitting through this. Do you guys have any questions for me? Okay, I see nobody typing anything. I don't hear anything. So I'm guessing you guys don't have questions, but I'm sure you will later on. So, of course, you can reach out, ask me questions. As far as Remind goes, um, I did I did mean to talk about this. So Remind, that thing that's at the beginning of the class, the top of the class where I put my little mini announcements and stuff. So if I send an announcement through there and it's going to everybody, it should come in a thing that says MA105 October 2019. So if it has that little header, that means that this is a message going to everyone. So like I sent that reminder on Monday about like the discussion post. That was one I sent to every, just, to remind, oh, hey, if you haven't done that yet, it's not too late, kind of thing. If I send an individual message to you through Remind, then it won't have that little header, and it should just say my name, or there won't be anything like that at all. So you should be able to tell the difference. Any messages that you reply to only go to me, so they don't go to the whole class. They just come to me. So don't worry about like, oh man, is somebody going to think I'm stupid to ask this question? Like, that's not a problem. I don't want to send too many messages through Remind, but if I get a lot of the same question, I do want to send reminders, or like the message today that Blackboard was down, that sort of thing. If you can change your notification settings to be email only, or you can do it through the app only, or whatever you need to do. You don't have to have it sent to your phone, or even text message to you. Like I have mine only going to the Remind app on my phone. I don't have it also going via text, but it's up to you guys how you want to get that. But just wanted to make sure everybody understood how that worked, and you can use that to contact me instead of emailing me if you want. You can send photos through there. So if you have a question on your work, you can actually take a picture and then send it through Remind to me, which is pretty neat. So yeah, so that's it. That's all I've got for you guys. So my dog started moving around, so I think she needs to go outside. So it's perfect timing. So I'm gonna end the recording, get everything processing, and if you guys have questions this week, of course, give me a call, contact me. All right? So you guys have a great night.